For nearly 4 years, the Alpha King never questioned where the quiet maid went every evening. She always left before sunset. Never a minute later. Never a minute earlier. At first, no one cared. Then people started noticing. She disappears like clockwork. The comment came from a young kitchen maid, stacking fresh bread onto serving trays. Another servant laughed. Maybe she's secretly meeting a handsome merchant. No, the palace steward replied with a snort. She claims she has a son. Several servants exchanged amused looks. A son? I've never seen a child. Neither has anyone else. The laughter spread through the royal kitchens. Only one person remained silent. Alpha King Valen Thorncrest stood near the doorway, reviewing reports, while waiting for the evening council session to begin. Neither has anyone else. He wasn't listening. At least, he told himself he wasn't. Still, the conversation drifted through the room. Every single evening, another servant said. She says the same thing. The steward rolled his eyes dramatically. My son is waiting for me. More laughter. Convenient excuse. Very convenient. At that exact moment, Leora Ravenshade entered, carrying a basket of freshly folded linens. She moved quietly, as she always did. Graceful, efficient, almost invisible. If someone hadn't spoken her name, most people probably wouldn't have noticed she was there. The steward did. Perfect timing. Leora. She stopped immediately. Yes, steward? We're short-handed tonight. She nodded politely. I understand. I'll need you to stay after sunset. For the first time since entering the room, hesitation crossed her face. I'm sorry. Her voice remained gentle. I can't. The steward frowned. Can't? My little boy is waiting for me. Several servants exchanged knowing smiles. Here it comes. The excuse. It's his birthday today, Leora continued quietly. I promised we'd celebrate together. The room fell unexpectedly silent. There was something different about her voice. Not rehearsed. Not defensive. Just desperate. The steward folded his arms. One evening won't matter. Leora's fingers tightened around the basket. It matters to him. You can celebrate tomorrow. A tiny shake of her head. No? The answer came barely above a whisper. I've already missed too many evenings. Something about those words lingered in the air. Even the servants stopped smiling. For a brief moment, Valen looked up from the report in his hands. Leora wasn't making excuses. He suddenly felt strangely certain of that. She bowed respectfully. I apologize for the inconvenience. Without waiting for permission, she turned and hurried toward the servants' entrance. The steward muttered something under his breath about irresponsible employees. Valen barely heard him. Instead, he found himself watching the door long after Leora disappeared through it. A curious feeling settled in his chest. Not suspicion. Not exactly. Curiosity. He told himself he only wanted to confirm the truth. Nothing more. Minutes later, wrapped in a plain traveling cloak instead of royal robes, the Alpha King quietly slipped through a side gate. Keeping several streets behind, he followed the maid through the capital, past busy marketplaces, across a narrow stone bridge, beyond the city walls, until finally, Leora stopped before a tiny cottage, nestled among wildflowers at the edge of the forest. She smiled, a smile unlike any he had ever seen inside the palace. Then the front door swung open. The front door flew open, before Leora had a chance to knock. A little boy burst into the yard with all the enthusiasm only children seemed capable of. Mom! His laughter filled the evening air as he raced across the small garden, a carved wooden wolf clutched tightly in one hand. Leora knelt just in time to catch him. There you are, she said, wrapping him in a hug. Happy birthday, my sweet boy. I thought you were going to be late. I told you I'd be here. You promised. And I always keep my promises. The little boy grinned, his missing front tooth making the smile even brighter. Valen watched from behind the old oak tree near the edge of the property. Something inside his chest tightened. He had seen countless noble families, royal heirs, children of every great alpha in the kingdom. None of those sights affected him. This one did. The warmth between mother and son felt effortless. Real. Leora reached into the cloth bag hanging from her shoulder. I brought your favorite honey cakes. And the surprise? She laughed. Someone's impatient. It's my birthday. I suppose that's a fair excuse. She produced a small wrapped package tied with blue ribbon. The boy gasped. For me? For who else? He tore the ribbon loose, with careful excitement, and revealed a beautifully carved wooden compass. Its lid opened to reveal tiny silver markings shaped like stars. His eyes widened. It's amazing. So you'll always find your way home. The words carried more meaning than the child understood. But Valen noticed the sadness hidden behind her smile. The little boy threw his arms around her again. You're the best mom ever. She kissed his forehead. And you're my favorite little wolf. He laughed, before suddenly noticing movement beyond the fence. His bright silver eyes lifted, straight toward the tree where Valen stood. The smile slowly faded into curiosity. For one impossible moment, neither moved. Then the child tilted his head. Valen felt the world shift beneath his feet. Silver eyes, exactly like his own. Dark hair that curled the same way his had as a boy. A stubborn chin inherited from the Thorncrest bloodline. Even the tiny scar above the left eyebrow. The exact place where every firstborn Thorncrest male carried a faint crescent-shaped mark. His father had it. His grandfather had it. Valen had spent years seeing that scar whenever he looked into a mirror. Now it stared back at him from a child no older than 4. The little boy blinked, then pointed. Mom? Leora turned. The moment she saw where he was pointing, all the color drained from her face. Her breathing stopped. Because Valen had stepped out from behind the tree. Neither spoke. Neither seemed capable of it. The evening breeze stirred the wildflowers between them. The little boy looked from one adult to the other, completely unaware of the storm gathering around him. Then, with innocent curiosity, he asked the question neither of them was prepared to answer. Mom? He pointed at Valen again. Why does that man look exactly like me? Silence swallowed the little cottage. Leora closed her eyes. Just for a moment. When she opened them again, resignation had replaced shock. She looked directly at the Alpha King, then quietly stepped aside and opened the cottage door. I suppose, she said softly, it's finally time you learned why I disappeared. The cottage was small, 1 bedroom, a stone fireplace, a worn wooden table set for 2. Fresh flowers rested in a glass jar by the window, and children's drawings covered one wall with crooked wolves, trees, and smiling stick figures. It wasn't much, yet somehow it felt warmer than the palace had in years. Valen stepped inside slowly. The little boy studied him with open curiosity. You can sit in my chair, he offered proudly, dragging a small stool toward the table. Leora managed a faint smile. Thank you, Aiden. So that's his name. Valen's voice came out quieter than he intended. Leora nodded. Aiden. The boy climbed onto his mother's lap, happily nibbling a honey cake, as though nothing extraordinary had happened. He looked between them. Do you know each other? Leora brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. We knew each other a long time ago. Were you friends? Neither adult answered. Aiden shrugged and returned to his cake. Children accepted silence far more easily than grown-ups. After a long moment, Leora spoke. Aiden, would you take your new compass to your room? His face lit up. Can I? Of course. I'll be back. The little boy hurried away, leaving the 2 adults alone for the first time in 5 years. Silence settled over the cottage. Finally, Valen asked the only question that mattered. He's mine. It wasn't really a question. Leora looked into the fire. Yes. The single word struck harder than any blade. Valen closed his eyes briefly. 5 years. 5 years with a son he never knew existed. Why? His voice cracked. Why didn't you tell me? Leora remained quiet for several seconds. Then she walked to a small wooden cabinet and removed a faded leather pouch. Inside rested an old silver wolf insignia, stained with dried blood. Valen recognized it immediately. It belonged to Captain Rowan, commander of the Royal Guard. He gave me this the night he died. She held the insignia carefully. As I was leaving the palace archives, Rowan found me. Her voice grew distant, carried by memory. He'd been stabbed. He could barely stand. Valen's expression hardened. He remembered Rowan's death. The investigation had blamed foreign assassins. Leora shook her head. He wasn't trying to save you. She looked directly into Valen's eyes. He was trying to save our child. The room fell silent. Before he died, she whispered, he told me there were nobles inside the palace, plotting against the throne. Valen's heartbeat quickened. They believed killing you would start a war. She slowly shook her head. No. Another pause. They believed killing your unborn heir would end your bloodline forever. The words stole the air from the room. I was already pregnant. I hadn't told anyone. Someone found out. Valen felt sick. Leora continued. Rowan begged me to disappear before dawn. He said they would search for me. They would never stop. And if they learned the child survived, she glanced toward the hallway, where Aiden hummed happily to himself. They would finish what they started. Valen finally understood. She hadn't left because she stopped loving him. She hadn't vanished because she doubted him. She disappeared because staying beside the Alpha King had become the most dangerous place in the kingdom for their son. Everything she sacrificed to keep one little boy alive. Neither of them spoke for a long time. The fire crackled softly between them. Outside, evening settled over the little cottage, painting the sky with shades of deep orange and violet. Valen stared at the silver wolf insignia resting on the table. Captain Rowan, one of the most loyal men he had ever known. The captain had died carrying a secret that changed everything. I searched for whoever killed him, Valen said quietly. I never found them. Leora nodded. I know. You knew? I stayed close enough to hear the news. He looked up. Close enough? A faint smile crossed her face. I never truly left the kingdom. Valen frowned. I couldn't. She folded her hands together. If I went too far away, I wouldn't know whether the people hunting Aiden had been caught. So you became a palace maid. She nodded once. Under another family name. The realization stunned him. For 4 years she had worked only a few corridors away, serving meals, cleaning chambers, walking the same palace halls, all while raising their son in secret beyond the city walls. And he had never recognized her. Not really. He remembered seeing Leora dozens of times. She was always quiet, professional, easy to overlook. Now he realized that had probably saved her life. The sound of little footsteps interrupted his thoughts. Aiden ran back into the room holding his new compass. Look, he proudly opened the lid. It points north. It does, Leora said warmly. Aiden turned toward Valen. Did you ever have one when you were little? Valen smiled despite himself. My father gave me one. Really? It wasn't nearly as nice as yours. The little boy's eyes grew wide. Did you get lost? More than once. Aiden laughed. I got lost chasing butterflies once. Leora chuckled. You were 5 houses away. I was exploring. You were crying. I wasn't crying. You absolutely were. Valen laughed. The sound surprised all 3 of them. For a moment, the weight of the evening disappeared. Aiden climbed onto the chair beside him. So, he leaned closer, as though sharing an important secret. Do kings know how to fish? Valen blinked. They should. But do you? I do. Can wolves swim? They can. Have you ever climbed a tree? Valen hesitated. When I was younger, Aiden gasped dramatically. So kings can climb trees. Some of them. I knew it. For nearly an hour, the questions continued. Each one stranger than the last. Did castles have ghosts? Could royal horses understand jokes? Did alpha kings ever lose at board games? Valen answered every question seriously. Each answer made Aiden laugh harder. By bedtime, the little boy could barely keep his eyes open. Leora tucked him beneath a warm blanket. Valen quietly stepped toward the door. Then he felt a tiny hand wrap around his fingers. Aiden looked up sleepily. "Will you come back tomorrow?" The question wasn't about a king, or a guest, or even a stranger. It was the hopeful question of a child who didn't want someone important to disappear again. Valen squeezed his hand gently. "I'll come back." The promise brought an immediate smile. Within minutes, Aiden was asleep. Neither adult noticed the shadow watching from the forest beyond the cottage. A hooded figure lowered a spyglass, then disappeared silently into the trees. The hidden heir had finally been found, and someone was already carrying the news to the people who wanted him dead. Valen returned the next afternoon. This time, he didn't come alone. A dozen royal guards rode behind him, their silver armor gleaming beneath the afternoon sun. 2 royal carriages followed, loaded with supplies, warm clothing, and enough provisions to last the cottage through the coming winter. The moment Leora stepped onto the porch, her expression hardened. She had expected him, not the soldiers. Aiden, however, ran into the yard with obvious excitement. "You came back!" Valen smiled as the little boy threw his arms around his waist. "I told you I would. Did you bring your horse again?" "I did. Can I feed him an apple?" "I think he'd like that very much." Aiden hurried toward the stable with one of the guards, happily chatting about horses before anyone could stop him. Only then did Leora meet Valen's eyes. "You brought the palace. I brought protection." She folded her arms. "They're the same thing." "No, they're not." Valen took a careful step closer. "The people who hunted you 5 years ago know about Aiden now." "I know. You know. I saw the tracks in the woods this morning." His heart sank. "You should have told me. I've spent 5 years surviving without royal guards." She glanced toward her son, who was proudly feeding apples to the royal horses. "I know how to recognize danger." Valen lowered his voice. "Then you know this isn't safe anymore." Silence settled between them. Finally, he spoke the words he had rehearsed all morning. "Come back to the palace." Leora looked at him as though he had suggested returning to a burning house. "No." The answer came without hesitation. "The palace is protected." It wasn't. He stopped. Her eyes never left his. "It wasn't protected when Captain Rowan died. It wasn't protected when someone learned I was carrying your child. It wasn't protected when I had to run before sunrise." Each sentence landed with quiet precision. Valen had no answer, because every word was true. "The walls are stronger now," he said at last. "The guards are loyal. So was Rowan." The reminder stole whatever argument remained. Leora stepped off the porch. Her voice softened, but her resolve did not. "You see a palace. I remember a trap. You see royal guards. I remember men searching every road while I hid in abandoned barns. You see home. I remember the place where my son almost died before he was born." Valen lowered his head. For the first time since becoming Alpha King, he realized there were wounds his authority couldn't heal. He could command armies, pass laws, punish traitors. None of it could erase 5 years of fear. None of it could restore trust that had never been given the chance to survive. After a long silence, he looked back at her. "I won't force you." Leora blinked. He continued quietly. "I should have found you years ago. I didn't. I should have protected you. I failed. So I won't ask you to trust promises anymore." He looked toward Aiden, whose laughter echoed across the yard. Instead of reaching for the carriage door, Valen removed his royal cloak and handed it to one of his guards. "I'll earn it." Leora studied him in silence. For the first time since he arrived, she saw not a king demanding obedience, but a father willing to begin at the very beginning. Valen kept his promise. Every evening, after the final council meeting ended, he exchanged his royal cloak for plain traveling clothes and rode to the little cottage beyond the capital. He never arrived with soldiers again, only himself. At first, Leora watched cautiously from the porch. She expected grand gestures, expensive gifts, royal promises. Instead, Valen simply asked Aiden what he wanted to do. The answer changed every day. One afternoon, they spent hours building a crooked treehouse behind the cottage. Aiden insisted it needed 3 windows. Valen insisted 2 were enough. The little boy won. Another evening, they fished beside the quiet river winding through the valley. Neither caught much. Aiden proudly declared the fish were too clever. Valen laughed and agreed. The following week, they carved wooden wolves together. Valen's looked respectable. Aiden's looked more like a sleepy sheep. "It's a wolf," Aiden insisted. "I can tell," Valen replied, with complete seriousness. Leora laughed so hard she nearly dropped the basket she was carrying. It was the first time Valen had heard that carefree laugh in years. He found himself smiling all the way home. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Without realizing it, they developed small traditions. Every visit began with Aiden racing to the gate. Every goodbye ended with promises about tomorrow's adventure. Sometimes they practiced with wooden swords in the clearing. Sometimes they explored the forest, identifying animal tracks. Sometimes they simply sat beneath the old oak tree, while Aiden asked endless questions. "Did you always know you wanted to be king?" "No." "What did you want to be?" Valen smiled. "A blacksmith." Aiden's eyes widened. "Really?" "I liked making things." The little boy considered this carefully. "I want to build bridges." "That's an excellent choice. So people can always get home." Valen glanced toward Leora, who stood quietly on the porch. For a moment, neither spoke. Both understood the deeper meaning in the child's innocent words. One crisp autumn afternoon, Aiden challenged Valen to a duel. The weapons were wooden. The rules changed every few minutes. The battle lasted nearly half an hour. Then Aiden tripped over a tree root and tumbled into the grass. For one frightening second, silence filled the clearing. Tears welled in the little boy's eyes. Without thinking, he reached out. "I want my dad." The words escaped before he realized what he had said. Valen was beside him instantly, gently lifting him into his arms. "It's all right. You just fell." Aiden buried his face against Valen's shoulder, then slowly pulled back. His cheeks turned pink. He looked from Valen to Leora, then smiled shyly. "I guess." His small voice barely rose above a whisper. "That's you." Time seemed to stop. Valen's throat tightened. He wrapped both arms around the little boy, holding him as though making up for every birthday, every bedtime story, and every hug he had missed. From the porch, Leora watched quietly. The fear she had carried for 5 long years hadn't disappeared. But for the first time, hope stood beside it. And somehow, hope was beginning to feel stronger. The attack came 3 nights later. Valen had been expecting it. The moment he learned someone had watched the cottage from the forest, he ordered a quiet investigation. No public announcements, no panic, only trusted guards. The findings were worse than he imagined. Captain Rowan had been telling the truth all those years ago. The conspiracy had never died. It had simply gone silent. Several noble families had secretly financed the assassination attempt against the unborn royal heir. When Leora disappeared, they assumed the child died with her. Now they knew otherwise. And desperate people made dangerous decisions. So Valen prepared. The royal guards hid among the trees surrounding the cottage before sunset. Archers settled into the hills overlooking the narrow road. No banners, no armor that reflected moonlight, only silence. Inside the cottage, Aiden slept peacefully. His carved wooden wolf rested beneath one arm. Leora tucked another blanket around him before joining Valen near the fireplace. "You knew they'd come." He nodded. "I hoped I was wrong." She looked toward the window. "So did I." Outside, the forest had become unnaturally quiet. Even the crickets had stopped singing. Valen's wolf stirred uneasily inside him. "They're here!" A sharp whistle cut through the darkness. The cottage windows exploded inward. Masked figures rushed from the trees. Steel flashed beneath the moonlight. Leora instinctively ran toward Aiden's room. Valen moved faster. He met the first attacker before the man reached the porch. The collision shattered the wooden railing. The assassin barely recovered, before Valen disarmed him with a single strike. The second attacker never reached the door. An arrow from the hidden royal guards buried itself in the ground, inches from his feet. "Royal Guard!" A command echoed through the forest. "Surround them!" The woods erupted. Dozens of hidden soldiers emerged from the darkness. The attackers froze. They had expected one frightened mother. Instead, they found an Alpha King waiting for them. The battle ended almost as quickly as it began. Swords clashed. Orders rang through the night. One by one, the conspirators were forced to the ground. Those who fled found every escape route blocked. Within minutes, it was over. Valen stepped back into the cottage. His breathing remained steady despite the fight. Leora stood in the hallway, holding Aiden protectively behind her. The little boy peeked around her skirt. His eyes searched until they found Valen. "Are you hurt?" Valen knelt in front of him. "Not even a scratch." Aiden threw his arms around his neck. "I knew you'd win." Valen closed his eyes briefly. "So did I." It wasn't confidence. It was a promise. A promise he intended to keep for the rest of his life. Outside, soldiers dragged the captured conspirators into the moonlit clearing. One guard approached and bowed. "Your Majesty." Valen looked up. "All of them?" The captain nodded. "Every last one. For 5 years, justice had been delayed. Tonight, it finally began." As dawn broke over the valley, messengers rode toward the capital, carrying news that would shake the kingdom. The hidden heir to the throne had been found. The conspiracy against the royal bloodline had been exposed. And before another sunset arrived, every noble in the kingdom would learn that the quiet palace maid they had overlooked had protected the future of the crown all along. By sunrise, the entire capital was awake. Not because of the morning bells, because of the rumors. Royal messengers rode through every district carrying the same announcement. The conspiracy against the crown had been uncovered. Arrests were underway. An emergency session of the Royal Council had been called. Nobody knew the full story. Yet, by noon, the Grand Hall overflowed with nobles, military officers, merchants, and representatives from every territory. Whispers echoed beneath the vaulted ceiling. Some feared another civil war. Others expected news of a foreign invasion. No one expected what actually happened. The great doors opened. Alpha King Valen Thorncrest entered first. His expression was calm, unyielding. Behind him came members of the royal guard escorting the captured conspirators in chains. The hall erupted into stunned murmurs. Several influential noble houses were represented among the prisoners. Men once considered untouchable now stood with lowered heads before the throne. Valen's voice carried through the chamber. 5 years ago, these men conspired to end the Thorncrest bloodline. Silence fell instantly. They believed murdering an unborn child would secure their own power. Gasps spread through the crowd. The prisoners remained silent. Evidence was presented. Captain Rowan's final report. Hidden correspondence recovered during the raids. Financial records linking the conspirators to hired assassins. Witness testimony. One by one, every lie unraveled. There was no denying the truth. When the final document was read aloud, Valen rose from the throne. "Their titles are revoked." His words echoed across the chamber. "Their lands are confiscated. Their wealth will be used to compensate every family harmed by their crimes." No one objected. No one dared. Justice had arrived too clearly. Then Valen looked toward the entrance. "Bring them in." The doors opened once more. A hush swept through the hall. Leora stepped inside wearing a simple blue dress. No jewels, no crown, just quiet dignity. Beside her walked Aiden. The little boy held his mother's hand tightly while looking around the enormous throne room with wide, curious eyes. Several palace servants gasped. They recognized her immediately. "The maid. That's Leora. I knew her." Shock spread rapidly through the chamber. Valen descended the steps of the throne. He stopped beside the little boy, then gently rested a hand on Aiden's shoulder. His next words became part of the kingdom's history. "This is Prince Aiden Thorncrest." The hall fell completely silent. "My son." The silence lasted only a heartbeat. Then applause erupted. Not forced, not polite, genuine. The sound filled every corner of the palace. Aiden looked up at Valen. Is everyone clapping because I remembered to brush my hair today? Laughter rippled through the hall. Even Valen smiled. Something like that. Across the room, the palace servants exchanged tearful smiles. For years they had known Leora only as the quiet maid who always hurried home before sunset. Now they finally understood why. She hadn't been hiding from the kingdom. She had been protecting its future. As the applause slowly faded, Valen turned toward Leora. His voice softened. One question remained. Not for the council, not for the nobles, only for her. Will you come home? He held her gaze. Not because I'm asking as your king, but because you want to. The entire hall waited for her answer. The throne room remained silent. Hundreds of people waited. Nobles, guards, servants, council members. Every eye rested on Leora. For years, she had dreamed of leaving the palace forever. Now the palace waited for her answer. Valen stood before her without speaking again. He had asked his question. The choice belonged to her, exactly as it should. Leora looked around the hall. She recognized familiar faces. The elderly cook who always slipped extra bread into her basket. The stable master who pretended not to notice when she hurried home before sunset. The young maids who once believed she invented a son to avoid working late. None of them looked at her with pity now, only respect. Then she looked down at Aiden. The little boy stared at the enormous throne with open fascination. So, he whispered, do I really get to live in a castle? The question made several people laugh softly. Leora knelt beside him. What do you think? Aiden considered it very seriously. Can we still visit our cottage? Of course. And the treehouse? We'll keep it. The river? We'll go fishing whenever you want. He smiled. Then I think 2 homes are even better than 1. His simple answer dissolved the last of the fear she had carried for years. Leora rose slowly, then met Valen's eyes. When I left, her voice echoed gently through the chamber. I believed the only way to protect my son was to raise him far away from this palace. She looked around the room. I don't regret that choice. No one expected her to. But this kingdom has changed. Her gaze returned to Valen. So have you. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Leora stepped forward, not toward the throne, toward the man. She placed her hand in his, not because he was Alpha King, because he had spent months proving he was worthy of being Aiden's father, and worthy of earning back her trust. The hall erupted into applause once more. Weeks later, during the Royal Moon Festival, the palace gates opened wider than they ever had before. The celebration filled every courtyard with music, lanterns, and laughter. This time, Leora entered through the front gates, not carrying laundry, not wearing a servant's apron. She wore the silver and midnight robes of the Luna. The crown placed upon her head felt lighter than she expected. Perhaps because it no longer represented duty alone. It represented choice. Beside her walked Aiden, in a miniature royal uniform, proudly carrying the ceremonial heir's sword, almost as tall as he was. He marched with exaggerated seriousness until he reached Valen. Then he slipped his small hand into his father's. Dad? Valen looked down with a smile. Yes? Aiden glanced toward the palace doors, then back at the cottage, visible in the distant hills beyond the city. Are we finally home? Valen looked at Leora. She smiled. Not the careful smile she once wore to hide fear. Not the hopeful smile of someone waiting to be chosen. A peaceful smile. The smile of a woman who had chosen her own future. She squeezed both their hands. We already are. Above them, fireworks burst across the night sky. The kingdom cheered. For years, its people believed their greatest treasure was the royal crown. They were wrong. Its greatest treasure was the family that survived betrayal, separation, and fear, and still found the courage to choose one another again.